What's up? It's Luke, and I want to dive a bit deeper on how Bitcoin mining actually works. So the most important website for getting a general understanding of mining and nodes is mempool.space. So when you first see this, you might think like, oh my God, like what's going on here? But it's actually not that complicated. Essentially, these are all blocks that have already been mined and are already validated. Underneath is the pool, the mining pool that has solved them. And each block shows how long ago it happened. So this one was mined 3 minutes ago. This one was mined 25 minutes ago. It also shows how many transactions were included, how much was sent, or maybe that's the total fees. Yeah, I think that's the total fees that were paid. And then this was the average fee that was paid. And that's going on the right. So you can go all the way down and see the Genesis block if you keep scrolling all the way to the end, which is the first block ever mined. But to the left are transactions that are waiting to be approved. So if I click on this, you can see each one of these boxes is a different transaction. And if I just click on one, this is an insane transaction that has a bunch of different inputs all going to one wallet of 0.8 Bitcoin, which is quite a lot. So what determines how quick your transaction can be mined is the fee, which is why fees are actually a feature, even though many will say like, oh, high fees are bad. No, high fees are good because you want a bidding war to be included in the current block. So miners are incentivized by to include transactions earlier by the fee. And I'll touch on that a bit later. So these miners look like this. This is an ASIC computer. As you can see, there's warehouses that hold, this is probably AI, but yeah, there's warehouses that actually look like this that hold thousands of these computers. They're very expensive and they specialize in doing one thing, which is running a single method as fast as they possibly can over and over and over again, guessing and checking until they get a desired output. So this is the method that they're running. It's called SHA-256. It's a one-way encryption method. And basically, you put in an input, it does a lot of cryptography, a lot of math, and you get an output. And what's special about this is that with this input and this output, if I have this output, there is no way that I can determine what the input was. So essentially, what Bitcoin does is they use this to their advantage to prove that a computer did a certain amount of work to receive this output. So the output that they're looking for is a certain number of zeros in front of the output. Now, why this is difficult is, as you can see, I got lucky just because putting this in, I got a 0. But if you put in stuff, you're going to get, random outputs, and that changes with every single thing that you put in. It's different. And so what they do is they are looking for a certain number of zeros in the front. And once you've done the work to find that, and you say, let's say the amount of zeros that you needed was 6, so this hypothetical output would be correct. It basically, then all of the transactions that you included in the block get approved, and for their work, the miners get rewarded in new issuance of Bitcoin, which is currently 3.1 blank, which halves every 4 years, and then they get the fees included of all of the transactions in the block. That is how they are rewarded. So the thing that gets sent in to the SHA-256 method is the hash of the last block, which never changes, the time, which updates every second, all of the pending transactions, which do change depending on if, let's say you're mining and there's the fee, the current average fee is 0.1 or 0.01 Bitcoin. Let's say a new transaction enters that pays a little bit higher. That would be pushed up in the rankings of approval, and all of the miners would want to include that transaction in their block. And then the lowest paying fee in the transaction or in the group of transaction would then get kicked out and would have to wait for the next block. Miners are incentivized with fees. And the last thing there's more stuff that gets included, but the only other thing that changes is the nonce. This is a number used once, and it's basically a way to guess. These computers are running thousands and thousands of SHA per second. So you need something that changes your output, right? You don't want to have to wait for a new second, and you don't want to have to wait for a new transaction to come on. So you use a nonce. So essentially what happens is the only two things that are changing are the seconds. So let's say you're at 0, 0, and this is just an example, and then your nonce is at 0, right? So now you're still at second 0, but since your computer can run thousands of times per second, every time you run, you increase this number, and you check, is this a certain amount of zeros? Let's say we need to find 2 zeros. You keep going. You increase your nonce, and keep going, and going, and going, and going. And it increases the nonce billions of times in a second. And then once a full second passes, you're now on second 1. And this resets back to 0. And you go up and up and up. And what they do is they keep doing this and doing this over and over again until they get a certain amount of zeros. And basically, the amount of zeros is very important, and it's called the difficulty adjustment. So it helps to manage swings in hash rate. So if you have 10 computers mining Bitcoin, it would take a long time for those 10, for one of them to figure it out if the amount of zeros was very high. So if there's not a lot of compute currently working on the network, you would want a lower number of zeros needed. And the reason for this is to maintain a 10-minute block time on average. You wouldn't want your currency, which gets distributed in each block, you wouldn't want that to be messed up by hundreds of computers entering the network, and then you have now a 5-minute block time. That would ruin the network. So they use the difficulty adjustment to combat this. It also, what's important about this is it allows for any future improvements in tech and computational power to scale to Bitcoin. Whereas if we now have quantum compute, everybody's worried about, oh, will quantum computing break Bitcoin? No, I think it will just improve Bitcoin, and it will just use the network exactly as it's intended. Quantum mining will be more profitable than trying to run an attack on Bitcoin, because if you have a quantum computer, you are going to give out more hash rate than any other current ASIC miner, and you would just use that to mine Bitcoin. And it wouldn't break because every 2,000 blocks on average, they check the amount of time that it took each block to be mined. And if the average was less than 10 minutes, they increased the difficulty. And if the average was more than 10 minutes, they decreased the difficulty. And they actually show it on the main site right here. So the next difficulty adjustment will be in 10 days. Our average time is 8.8 minutes. That means that the difficulty probably needs to be increased, which would mean adding an extra 0. So yeah, if this helped you understand mining, just subscribe.